Welcome to Asian Times TV. We have a special show today. We have Rani Singh joining us from Kathmandu, Nepal. You might recall she reported for us earlier from Dhaka, Bangladesh. Today she's joining from Nepal, filing a special report. She's now with BBC, reporting on foreign affairs. So we're very pleased to have her today with us. Rani, welcome to the Princeton TV show again. How are you?
Thank you, Dinesh. I'm really pleased to be back with you.
So we really feel privileged to have you again. You are like our roving reporter who covers all areas of the globe.
It's fun. It's really nice to be here. I'm in the Kathmandu guest house, and before I tell you about that, have you added any millions to your millions of viewers since we last spoke?
Have I done what? I'm sorry?
How many millions of people are we playing to tonight?
Oh, I think a couple of million people will see the show in New Jersey and Philadelphia area.
That's great.
And then of course, scores of people watch the show on the internet. So you're a very popular guest.
Thank you. Well, you're a popular friend and anchor, Dinesh.
Thank you so much.
Enough of this backslapping.
So I understand you had a meeting with Jimmy Carter, who was visiting Kathmandu just a few weeks ago.
I did. Do you want me to tell you about that, or do you want me to tell you where I am first?
Yeah, go ahead. Tell me where you are, and then tell me about Jimmy Carter.
Okay. I'm talking to you, and I don't normally mention my location, but this one is a bit historic. It's the Kathmandu guest house. It's actually the oldest hotel in Kathmandu, and it kind of kick-started the whole tourist area locally. And all the international TV crews and journalists kind of really flood this place when anything's happening, because it's a former king's mansion.
Wow.
And it's a family-owned heritage hotel, and the founder is Karna Sakya.
Okay.
CEO is his son, Rajan. And it's a deluxe hotel, but it started off in a budget way. So as a tribute to the past, they still have a room which is only selling for $2 a night. Can you believe that? Isn't that appealing?
So that's where you're staying?
But no. Thank you. No, I'm not staying here right now. But they do keep this $2 a room night, and I thought that $2 a night room, and I thought that would be very appealing to recession hit Americans.
It's a nice plug for tourism to Kathmandu.
Tourism is one of Nepal's big industries, but
right.
I'm not saying that as a plug. I'm saying it because this is the oldest hotel in Kathmandu, and it kind of started the whole tourist arena around here.
Right.
Well,
I was in the valley in '98.
Yes.
For several weeks.
Yes.
And then, the coup broke out.
Yes.
Where I think like 8 or 9 members of the royal family were killed. And then the government, I think, has gone through several transitions, like 2 or 3 different transitions. And now there's a new government, obviously, and there's an election coming up. Yeah. So hopefully you'll touch on that as well.
Yeah. In fact, there's an interim government at the moment because previous government has been sort of dissolved.
Right.
And four-party alliance, which is led by a chairman, which is kind of guiding the government through to elections, which will probably happen at the end of the year. And that leads us back to Jimmy Carter, if you want to talk about that now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, excellent. So what was your interaction with Jimmy Carter? He was there. There's a center now, you said, that was set up for his foundation?
Jimmy Carter has established a Carter Center in many, many countries around the world, and he's particularly fond of Nepal. He really likes his country, and he was here just within this period that I've been here. So he came along with his country director and other staff members, loads of security at another hotel, and gave his press conference. There were loads of journalists there. And his job is to look at how Nepali citizens are really, how they're faring, and to really oversee what's happening as Nepal comes up to its elections.
Mm-hmm.
So see that things are clear and transparent, and really does, the Carter Center will look at the monitoring of it.
Okay.
and that they're very frank, and he said some very interesting and positive things
Okay.
About Nepal, but it was very clear that he's deeply committed and came here personally.
Right. Now, Nepal, of course, is very important because, very much like Bangladesh and Burma and Bhutan, it's obviously in the foothills of the Himalayas, and it's strategically located. That's the point I was trying to make, between India and China. So it's quite important in terms of the Pacific pivot, the thing that we keep talking about, America trying to rebalance its position and role in the Pacific. So is Nepal sort of also playing a role in the rebalancing?
It is really playing a role in the rebalancing. First of all, it's really interesting because the inflow of foreign direct investment has been growing since 2006 and is now standing 27%, even though it's a poor country. And Nepal, I see as a country of great potential. It has the potential to produce 40% of the water in South Asia, the water power. 83,000 megawatts of hydropower could come from this country.
Mm-hmm.
So it has great potential. But as you say, it's strategically placed between two titans of the subcontinent, China, over 1 billion people, and India, over 1 billion people.
Right.
And then with 30 million.
Right.
And both countries are being extremely generous to Nepal. Nepal needs help. So before we go to the American relationship with Nepal, it's really right to look at China and India. India is the largest foreign investor in Nepal, the largest trading partner. In 2012, there was $14 billion worth of trade there.
Now, it's an open border, right, between India and Nepal?
It's an open border, yes.
Right.
There is that kind of restrictive
and tourism obviously is one of the bigger markets for Nepali population. A lot of tourists go to Nepal from India. Now with China, it's not an open border, I don't think. Is that right?
No, it's not. It's strategically the China-Tibet border is up in the Himalayas, so it's a much tougher border to get across. But China-Nepal relations are extremely strong, and they are growing big time.
Okay.
And China's getting in on this water power sector. It formed an agreement and worth $1.6 billion, and gave $120 million grant last year. So it really is assisting Nepal in a great way with railways, with roads, with infrastructure. I've been on some of those roads and crossed those bridges, and I've seen it for myself. So it's sort of coming into that water power sector that India has traditionally been in.
Well, I remember the Kathmandu Valley was relatively well developed. I mean, the streets were all, paved. But then when you go outside of the valley to, some of the ranges,
yes.
Obviously there's more development, probably, I'm sure, that's taken place since.
Yes, indeed. Well, yes. I mean, tourism, if you come here and which you have done and look at the mountains, they're just so spectacular. The Nepali Himalayas contain some of the tallest mountains in the world. Everybody knows about Everest.
Right.
And it is a real magnet for tourists and trekkers. So I was talking to Raj Bajgai, who's the MD of Gurkha Encounters, and he was telling me that the tourism industry is really thriving, and he's a sort of entrepreneur.
Well, I remember going as far north as Pokhara.
Yeah.
Which is right at the foothills of the Annapurna range.
Yeah.
And from there, actually, on a good morning, like around 4 o'clock, before it gets really, the air gets really dense, you could actually see the Everest range very clearly.
Yes, you can. And I actually went on a mountain flight, Dinesh, because, there's been some criticism in the press because there have been a few accidents, as often happens,
Right.
in other countries, over the years. So I was particularly interested to look at sort of aviation safety because it's so important in the tourism sector.
Then. So Rani, so tell me about tourism industry, which should be picking up quite heavily now, right?
It is. In fact, it hasn't really dropped at all, Dinesh. I was talking to Raj Bajgai, who's the MD of Gorkha Encounters, and he was telling me that Americans really like trekking in the highest mountains. They love going to Everest Base Camp at over 5,000 meters. And the mountain flights around Everest are really quite very popular. Mm-hmm. And tourism hasn't dropped off at all. They do the ground handling, of course. And this guy Raj is a bit of he's a young entrepreneur. He's 40, but he's also actually in politics, and he's quite charismatic, sort of slightly Kennedy-esque, and he has an amazing set of contacts. So international TV crews and journalists really kind of value his support because he does.
But is it the case that there's also a road now from the Chinese side that you can get to the base camp actually by taking this road, this 2-lane highway?
I didn't know about that, Dinesh. You're ahead of me there.
Oh no, that's absolutely true, because the Chinese apparently opened it right before the the Olympics game.
Yes, they have. They have really worked hard on building roads and building access into Nepal, which really does help trade. It helps business, and it means access to both countries is much quicker.
So apparently from the Chinese side, you would get to the base camp using this 2-lane highway.
Wow.
Well, the Indians were very nervous about it, of course. Yeah.
The Indians. Yeah, I mean but people like to play that off, that there's competition, but actually, while both countries are investing heavily in Nepal, they're also improving relations between themselves. That's the real story. India and China are seeking more and more cooperation with each other. So I think that competitive element is slightly overblown by some pundits.
In the West?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
whereas in India, if you're in India or in China, it's more of a complementary relationship.
I think so. There's a historic relationship with India,
right.
Sentimental, affectionate relationship.
Right.
And there's an appreciation in Nepal for what China is doing as well. And I don't think there's an awful lot of competition. I actually had an interview with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs today, the spokesman there, Arjun Bahadur Thapa, and he said that he really appreciates the relationship with both countries, and Nepal stands strong in the world and has extremely good relationships with America, and that's growing, in fact. So I was really interested to look at tourism. And,
well, I don't have any disputes about that. I mean, I think the only question that we have, outstanding question, is really of the Tibetan rights or rights of the Tibetan people. Yeah. I don't know. That's kind of sensitive. I don't know if you can speak about that.
It is a little bit sensitive. So, but
But you still see a lot of refugees in Kathmandu Valley from Tibet.
Yes, and in fact, the charity that I was having a look at is doing incredible work with Tibetans up in the mountains. It's very hard to get up to those areas, but a lot of Tibetan settlements and villages are up this side, the Nepali side of the Tibetan border, because when the Tibetans came out around the time when the Dalai Lama came across into India, they settled there. So it's really interesting. And they have their own Tibetan culture, their language, their music, and I was really interested to go up there and have a look at it, because that's where the Dolma Development Fund is very, very active in that region.
I see. Okay.
So
do you want to talk about the Dolma Fund now, or what do you want to do?
Yes. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great story. I mean, I looked up the research on it, and it's an equity fund started by an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Tim Gosha, I think.
Yes. Exactly.
He's quite dynamic.
Yeah.
And it's a great idea. Obviously, he's investing in the valley.
Yeah.
And helping to build small to medium-sized businesses. He started with ecotourism, but now he's branching out into other businesses as well. Is that right?
he has, there are sort of two or three prongs to Dolma, which Tim Goethe had started. He actually came to stay in a village called Brizim, which is high up in the Himalayas, not far from the Tibetan border at all, and sort of really appreciated the peacefulness and the atmosphere there, and the wonderful culture that people maintain, and decided to actually bring the Nepal's first impact investment fund to the country, and this is Dolma Development Fund.
Now, tell me about the name though, Dolma. What is that? Where does the name come from?
Yeah, he discovered this young girl, I think she was around 8 or 9. She was from a poor family, and he decided that she should be sponsored to go to school, because if you're poor out there, you don't have any hope of education. So she was their very first scholar. And in fact, the charity has come such a long way that she now is about to graduate this year.
Right, so the charity was started 10 years ago. So in fact, this week, I read that she's taking her high school examination or something.
Exactly, and I saw her. She's a gorgeous young lady, and I went to Dunche, which is where there's a school base that the Dolma Fund has invested in. It's called the Highland Boarding School.
Right.
And it's really moving, because I saw these children who came from these Tibetan families, these poor families, where the parents, the father maybe was a farmer, very, very, very impoverished. No hope of an education at all, or being able to pay. And these children have been selected to come to this school, and they're sponsored. And I actually saw people. I saw sponsors who were attending the ceremony for the 10-year anniversary. And these children actually said how grateful they were. And they dressed up in lovely costumes. They sang and they danced. And it was such a wonderful atmosphere there in the highest mountains in the world around us.
Right.
And they expressed their gratitude. And you realize that these children have a future now.
Right.
They could go on to college, and it only costs $19 a month to sponsor a Karnataka day school there. More obviously.
So it is factually true that if you educate a girl, you can change the world.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I asked these children, what do you want to be? And many of them said, we want to be nurses, we want to be doctors. They have ambition now.
Right.
And, going through other areas of Nepal, I saw village children, many children doing things like, breaking slabs of concrete and, carrying plants and things in baskets, looking dirty and grubby. And, perhaps if not for Dolma, these the children in the school would be like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very moving to witness that. So that's one of the things that Dolma has invested in, and Tim Goethe has started. It's this kind of meeting. The big picture is it's this meeting of the investment world, which has been through many crises and realized that it isn't as the way it could be. And it's the meeting of the investment world and charity, because it's sort of meeting point, because Dolma tries to make sure that there is a return, the impact fund, there isn't a return for investors, but that the work that's done should have a positive impact on the society that's working.
Right. So the funding, I think what you're saying is the funding comes from this equity fund that Tim Gosha manages. With backing from some banks, I think, in London. And venture capitalists. Right? And they started with ecotourism, and now they're branching out into other smaller industries. But they're basically tracking, return on their investment. And I think basically the fund, the Dolma Fund itself, has grown over 10 years.
Yes, exactly. And they're always looking for businesses where there will be a good return. And the ecotourism, can I talk about that, Dinesh? Because that's really
absolutely
what I started to explore in this trip.
Right.
I hadn't had that experience fully before.
Now, have they actually built facilities in the valley?
They have.
Okay.
It's in the mountains, Dinesh. It's in the
Okay.
mountains. What Tim has done is he's linked up with a wonderful guy called, he's only 36, called Singh Lama,
Right.
who has a wonderful backstory of his own. He is of Tibetan origin. His mother came over during the uprising because his grandfather was persecuted, and so there's a dramatic story about how the family came over, and the mother lost her father in the river. You know, he was swept away and killed, but they made it over, settled in Britain, which is where Sering was born.
I see.
And it's this pure Tibetan village, and many of his relations are there. And what he is actually sort of the expert in this field and tour operator in the region. So he's a great person to be a guide for me. And he started these eco tours. You know, like normally trekkers and other mountaineers may go up into the mountains and they may stop one night here, one night there. What Sering has done is that he invites people, eco tourists, to come and have the village experience. So you go, you live amongst the villagers, you live in a lodge, a real Tibetan lodge, you know, with the low ceiling of stone, and you eat with the people.
And do you get to have a meeting? Do you get to have a meeting with Dalai Lama as well?
Dinesh, the Dalai Lama is not here.
No, I know that.
But you know, they do worship and respect the Dalai Lama. So in the monasteries here, you see pictures of the Dalai Lama.
Right.
There was a lovely monastery in Britain village, and amongst the different versions of Buddha that you see, I saw photographs of Dalai Lama, the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, and also there was a Tibetan monk who was there in the village while I was there, and he worships the Dalai Lama.
Right.
So I was able to experience some meditation practice, to listen to Tibetan chants and music, and it was an incredibly immersive experience over a few days.
Yeah, I heard Tim talk about this online, and basically he was berating the English public who was listening to him for industrializing and for deforestation, and how the villagers really know how to live in harmony with nature.
Yes.
He said, and that this model potentially gives access to this serene sort of habitation that certainly certain segments of the British population can afford to return to.
Yes, I think so. I mean, it certainly did me a whole ton of good.
So how expensive is it to take a tour like that?
Well, it's not that expensive, really. It's not that expensive at all. I think it can be done for, I think you pay for your own flight, but it's well under £1,000. And to have this experience is so precious. First of all, to get up to that area, you need a guide. So you can't do it on your own very easily. It is steep, it's high. But then once you're there, with in this village of 42 houses, and eating that sort of organic, fresh food, experiencing the stillness and the calm, it's a wonderful model. And Sering is very committed. He's 36. He's educated. He was sponsored when he was young to be educated, and he could have gone off to some foreign city and established a life there. But he's really committed to rhythm, to developing this kind of ecotourism. And he's now doing this kind of eco-trekking and ecotourism elsewhere outside of Britain as well.
Fantastic.
And the next stage he's going to is he's starting to invited an architect to design plans for him to make eco-lodges in Britain. So it'll be sort of slightly more upscale experience with all modern facilities. And again, that'll be a first for this area. The Dolma Fund invested in, toilets and showers and things. So you're not uncomfortable when you come here. if you're a Westerner like me. But Sering is now planning to take it even further and is looking for investors as I speak.
So talk about the India-China relations and how that sits, with Nepal now, with especially with the election coming up.
Well, everybody is watching very closely. I mean, Nepal doesn't move quickly, and is yet to draft a constitution for itself in its new democratic mode. And elections were promised over the summer. They've been delayed. They were promised in the autumn. They've been delayed. And so it looks like they might now happen around December, January. So everybody's watching very closely. There is an interim government with a four-party alliance. It's overseen by a chairman who's a Maoist, and he's quite a capable person called Prajanda, that's sort of guiding the government as it moves towards election time. India and China are not sort of really interfering that way in terms of the process.
Mm-hmm.
Their involvement is more sort of in a benign way to in development and so on, as is America. America is putting a lot of money.
So did Jimmy Carter, did the president say anything about that, President Carter?
President Carter said that he hoped he'd like to see more equality in Nepal, especially between women and men. And he said that he was hopeful that there would be free, fair, and transparent elections, and that he was engaging with all the political parties and was appreciative of their cooperation.
So thank you for informing us about what's happening in Nepal currently. I haven't been there a few years, so definitely looking forward after your report to getting back there to the valley.
I really recommend a visit, Dinesh.
Doing some trekking.
Yeah, I really do recommend a visit here. It's a wonderful blend of East and West. It's
excellent.
Exciting country.
Are your boys with you there or not?
No, they're not.
Okay. All right. Well, have fun. And thanks for dialing in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And let us know where you go next on your global travels.
Of course, I'm sure I'll be reporting for you again.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us from Asian Times TV. Join us again next week for another edition of Asian Times TV. Thank you. Bye.